Hi, this is Jay for Simply Maya, and welcome to another tutorial. This particular tutorial we're going to be looking at creating turntable renders using the mental array physical sun and sky. As with most modelling turntables, the majority of people tend to use ambient occlusion, but that's all very well. You can do some really cool stuff with that. But some of the problems that you do get with ambient occlusion renders are the sort of burnt out, sort of very bright whites. And it takes a little bit of tweaking to get that to look right before you can get something acceptable out. And also ambient occlusion is one of the slowest render passes available, and really, you don't really want to spend too much time rendering stuff out when you can get it done pretty quick and pretty cheap. So with that in mind, what we've decided to do for this tutorial is actually introduce you to turntable rendering using the mental array physical sun and sky, and it's a pretty cool setup. It's something that's very similar to what I've been doing in production over the last few months, but I've been using V-Ray in that case, but because I don't have V-Ray at hand here, I've decided to show you an alternative way of doing it with your own renders using the physical sun and sky attributes. As you can see here in front of us, what we've got is our alien character that you may have seen on the site, and this is a short turntable setup that I did of him using the physical sun and sky settings. So as you can see, it's nice and warm in the highlights and stuff, and the shadows got a nice cool blue going on. And the shader itself is actually just a blend shader with the reflectivity and the speculars all turned down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to set something like this up. It's very good, very easy, and should have you underway in no time at all. So let's close this guy off, and here we've got our standard sort of turntable scene. So I've got a ground plane in here, and what I've done as well is I've added a locator. And the locator is this yellow colour, which I will show you how to do. So we just go over to our attribute editor, click on the locator 1 tab, go down to display, and just scroll down a bit. And if we go to drawing overrides, you can see that we have a checkbox ticked that says enable overrides. And usually when you first start out in something like this, this will be off, so just switch it on, and it will bring on all these little attributes, and then you can go in and pick a colour with the slider, and then it's done. So mine's yellow, so it stands out, so job done there. Okay, the other thing we need to do now is actually key this locator so it rotates 360 degrees, beg your pardon, from frame 1 to frame 200. So what we'll do, we'll just go over to the channel box and we'll highlight the rotate Y attribute, and we'll right click and just key select it. So at frame 1 we've got a keyframe. So what we want to do now is scrub all the way through to frame 200, and then the rotate Y channel again, just type in 360 and hit enter, and now you can see we've got a keyframe at channel at frame 200. So if we just have a quick scroll or a quick scrub through the timeline, you can see now that the locator now rotates 360 degrees. Okay, so that's all good. So there we go. Okay, so what we need now is a model. So let's go File, Import, and what we'll look for is we need to find our character. So I'm just going to jump up to my folder and turntable rendering, and we want a Maya scene, and we want our alien character. So we're just going to import him, and there he is. And I'm just going to open up the outliner. I've got a keyboard shortcut, but you can find it under Window and go to Outliner, which is just there. And what we want to do is just highlight the object itself and middle mouse drag that onto the locator node. And then what you can do is just deselect, and there we go. If we just scrub through the timeline, you can now see that the character is connected to the locator. And what you can do, you can save this scene out obviously without the alien, so you can just bring in your models at 000 and parent them to the locator, and your scene is ready to go. And even easier if you've got lights set up in there already. Okay, so what we want to do now is I'm just going to jump over to my render layout, which I've already got set up, and there we go. So I'm just going to hit 5, so we go into shaded. I'm just going to jump into the hyper shade here. What we've got these shaders. These are the Maya standard ones just here that come with every default scene. And we've got this one here that's come on from the alien character itself, and the blin, which is obviously on this background. And all I want to do is want to get rid of the main shader, and we'll just assign that this blin to the rest of it, and we'll go edit, delete unused nodes, and it's now got rid of that other shader. So I'm just going to double click this, and we're just going to call it render shader _m for material. And as you can see, that's already been adjusted, so the specular is quite low, the reflectivity is quite low, and the specular roll-off and eccentricity are very low as well. And the colour itself I've made a bit brighter than the standard grey that you get on a shader when you first create one. So we're all good to go now. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to go over to the render settings, make sure you're on mental ray, which is just here, and go to the indirect lighting tab. Okay, what we've got here is the physical sun and sky create node, so just hit that and hit create, and there we go, and we have in our scene a directional light, as you can see there. Let's just close this off, and if we just jump onto the utilities tab, you can see we've now got 3 other nodes. One's a camera exposure, and the other one is the mental ray Maya physical sun and physical sky nodes, or shaders as they're called in the documentation. Okay, so we can close that off. That's all done, that's all good. And let's just jump over to the light. Now the light itself is going to generate shadows and stuff like that, but it is actually connected to, if I can get it, there we go, it is actually connected to these 2 nodes as well, the physical sky and the physical sun. So we haven't really got to adjust anything on the actual light itself, because all the adjustments will come through the physical sky and the sun nodes as well. So you haven't got to really worry about anything there. And what we're doing is not very difficult at all. We're not going to go into massive in-depth detail on anything, but what we are going to do is just show you how to tweak some settings and make the render look pretty. Okay, so first thing we want to do is we're going to go to render and perspective 1, and we're just going to do a quick render and just see what the scene looks like without any adjustments. And as far as I know, it should look quite burnt out and sort of quite bright, almost verging on that ambient occlusion feel that I was on about earlier. So we'll just wait for this to finish. And here we go, so we're just going to do the final rendering. And there we go, so that's all popped, so that's all good. So what we want to do, we're going to save this out, and what I think we need to do first is adjust the brightness, and what we can do with that is through the Maya exposure symbol, and if you come down here to gamma, that's the one we're going to adjust first of all. Now the gamma is basically like an overall sort of brightness intensity control for the whole scene using this, because this is actually connected to the camera. So what we're going to do is drop this down to 1.8, which should give us a fairly good density on the next render. So it won't be too bright or burnt out this time. So here we go again. So as you can see now, the blues are looking a bit more saturated. Even though this is just the computing the final gather points at the moment, you can see already the difference that that's already made. Okay, so that's just rendering out now. It's pretty quick. And we're rendering at 1920 by 1080, which is HD. Okay, so that's done, so we'll just drop that in, save one out. So if we just do a quick scroll, you can see the difference now between the 2 images. So it's quite bright, and now we just brought it down a bit more. Okay, so that's all good. So the gamma is pretty good for us to use from now. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is actually create a better looking image. And what we can do is, by selecting the directional light, what we're going to do, we're going to rotate this down and then just bring that round. And what's happening is this is acting like a sunlight, so the less the angle is, it's acting like a sunset. So what we're going to get, we're going to start getting blues and yellows added to our image now, as the sort of, if you like, the sun begins to set, if you like, if you want to look at it that way. So the directional light is actually our sunlight. So the lower the angle, the more sort of saturated the colours are going to be and stuff like that. Whereas if it was right up here, this would be like high noon, if you like. So if we just drop that down, and I'm just going to bring it around to the side just a little bit, just adjust that, and we'll do another render. And what we should see now is some blue and a bit more yellow going in onto the highlights. So there we go, you can see the longer shadow, you can see the blues have gone darker, and hopefully the highlights will now start to have a bit of yellow in there. So there we go, you can see that on the background now already, you can see a bit of yellow hue. There we go, so there's the yellow just kicking in now. Okay, so that's looking better already. So let's just scroll back. So that's what we started with. There's our second render, and there's our third render. So it's already come along very, very quickly. So I'm just going to bring it round a little bit more and just rotate that down. So that's all good. Okay, so what we want to do is just run through a couple of the simple controls that's sort of relevant for this exercise. We're going to be looking at the haze, the red-blue shift, the saturation, and also the shadow softness and the sampling for these as well. So first of all, let's just jump over to the haze. The haze is going to add, like as it says, a haze to the actual scene, and this is going to be sort of a yellowy colour. So what I propose to do is start out with a value of 2. You may want to do something a bit more intense, it's entirely up to you, but I'm going to start with a value of 2 because I found that works quite well. The red-blue shift, this basically controls the redness in the image. So I'm just going to put 0.05 in that, just to take a little bit out. And the saturation, which is obviously going to give us more contrast in our colours, I'm just going to put up to 1.3. Okay, and we'll just save this image out, and we'll do another render. So as you can see, it's starting to get a bit more saturated in the colours. And also, because we've lowered the light as well, the yellows are going to start to get a bit more sort of warmer as well. So let's see how that acts. There we go. And that's because also we've added a haze to it. It might be too much for you, you never know. So you can always play around with those settings. I think that is a little bit too much on that. So what I'll do is, for the haze, let's do 1.35. Okay, and we'll store that image. Now we'll do another render. So it's very, very easy to set up, nothing too drastic, nothing too taxing. So once you're happy with how your highlights are sitting and everything else, you know, you can then begin to give that rendering out. Okay, so that's rendering nicely. There we go, that's much better. Probably take a little bit of saturation out as well, so what I'm going to do is drop that down to 1.2 as well. But let's just have a look from the beginning. So there's our first image, second, third. So there we go, so that's much, much better already. Okay, the other thing that we do want to look at, so let's just get rid of these images, we don't need that. And there we go. So this is our image that we're going to be working with at the moment. Okay, so the last thing we want to do with terms of the light aspects are the shadows. So at the moment, as you can see, it starts off quite sharp, nearer to the object, and as it goes off it does exactly what it would do on a real sunlight. It starts to fade off, but I want to give it a bit more softness in the shadows, so I'm just going to hit 3. Okay, and we'll store that image as well, and we'll give that a quick render. Okay, so we're just doing a bit more of a compute on the final gather points. It shouldn't take too long. Again, these frames are rendering at about 19 to 20 seconds. And there we go, so you can see the shadows a lot softer, but it's very, very broken up, and that's all because of the sampling, and we need to increase the sampling because the standard is at 8. So what I would do is really crank that up to 32. Okay, and what we'll do a selection render. So there you can see that it's a lot softer now. It's not as broken up. But again, you can just still see a little bit of breaking up going on there, so I'd crank that up to 64. And again, we'll do another render. And you can go up and up as much as you want until it's as fine as you need it to be. But again, bear in mind it's animation that you're doing here. You know, it's a turntable, so it hasn't got to be, you know, super soft, because with the motion that's going on with it, you're not going to notice too much anyway, I hope. Okay, there we go. So that was 25 seconds for that frame. So it's all looking pretty good. So I would say that's ready to go. So let's just do one more whole render just to see the whole thing, and then I think we'll be ready to go. So what we're going to do next is I'm just going to show you how to set up your render settings, and then show you where to hit the batch render button, and then it's down to you to put your frames together. I mean, I've put mine all together in a compositing package for the QuickTime movie that was shown at the beginning of this tutorial. So we'll leave that to you to choose how you're going to do yours. Okay, there we go. So it's looking pretty good. So almost done. So just calculating the shadows. And there we go. So the render time on that one was 1:15. That's because we've cranked up the sampling actually on this image, but also the fact is that looking at it now, we're actually rendering at 2880. So if I went down to my actual 1920 by 1080, that would be a lot quicker. So that's my mistake there. I do apologise. So we'll just do that very, very quickly. So I'll just show you how quick that can be at that resolution as well, but it's still pretty quick even at the higher one. Okay, so that's rendering through pretty brisk. So this should be about 19 to 20 seconds on this. Oh, there we go. So that was actually 36. That's because of the high sampling, but it's still fast. Anyway, so that's pretty good. Okay, so let's head on over to the render settings tab, and what we want to look at is our common files first of all. And the first thing you want to look at is the path to where your images are going to go for your renders. So the way to do that is go to Project and Set, and as you can see, my project's already set in my J documents, my projects, and just set it to default there. So we're just going to set that, and what will happen is it will just default the render images into the images folder. Okay. The file name prefix we've called alien underscore. Okay, so that will appear there, and just down here we've got frame animation extension, and that's the frame number and dot the extension, which is the extension is the file format, which in this case is a TIFF. Okay, frame padding is the amount of zeros that you want on the front of each frame, In this case I've chosen 4, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4 figures there. Let me just show you, if I put 5 it'll add an extra 0 at the beginning of that, so there you go, so we've got 0, 0, 200, but that you'd only do if you're sort of doing, you know, thousands of frames upwards. So you just have to think that way, and how many zeros you want on the front of that. You may even just want 3, so if I just hit 3 there, so all you end up with is the 1 to 200, but I usually do 4 in these cases, just so it's easier to read as well, so that's all good. Okay, so with those all set, that's good. Let's just have a scroll down, just make sure you're on the correct camera that you're rendering from. That's all good. 1920 by 1080, which is HD, so all good to go there. Let's go to quality. As you can see, my sample for the anti-aliasing isn't high at all. It's just on 1, and it's, you know, it's adequate for what we need for this exercise. You can increase it obviously to 2 or 3, but bear in mind your render times will go up. You'll probably, if you put it on 3, you're probably looking at 4 minutes a frame, I would say, on the HD side of things. So that's all good. Filter, box or Mitchell. Box is absolutely fine. Mitchell, you have to fiddle around with it a little bit to get sharper sort of images, because the standard settings will make it blur. But the box, filter size 1 and 1 is absolutely fine. So that's all good. Let's just go to features. Primary renderer, scanline or ray tracing. I find ray tracing is a lot faster, so I would use that, and that's all good to go. And also you can increase your final gather accuracy as well if you want. 100 again is perfectly adequate for this type of exercise, but if you're getting funny blotching on the images, do increase that, and that will get rid of it. And that's pretty much it. So we've got the names and extensions and stuff, frame padding, start frame range, end frame range, so it's 1 to 200, and that's all good. Okay, so you should be ready to go from there. Okay, so the final thing you want to do is go to rendering, and if you go to render and hit batch render, it will start automatically, and it will render through, and then you'll have your 1 to 200 frames sitting in your default images folder where we've just set our project to. So and then you'll end up with the QuickTime like we had at the beginning of this tutorial. So we're going to end it there, and hopefully you've learnt something new, and that you like this sort of style of rendering for your turntables and stuff, and we hope to bring you another free tutorial very soon. So take care for now. Cheers.